On today's episode, we're finally returning to our versus matches, bringing Halo back, but this time with the Punix's big brother, the Infinity-class Supercarrier going up against the Aurora-class Battleship from the Stargate franchise. These warships are equipped with advanced and ancient technology from their own precursor civilizations, the Infinity using reverse engineered tech, and the Aurora being an original vessel from way back when. So without further ado, our first vessel is the Aurora-class Battleship, the mainstay warship of the Lantean domain during their centuries-long war with their Wraith enemies from 10,000 years ago. The class enjoyed multiple generations of upgrades and variations throughout the conflict, becoming ever deadlier with each successor. Even early on, the battleship was effective as an anti-fleet vessel, able to combat several capital ships at once and destroy them with minimal damage. While it doesn't possess any fighters whatsoever, its unique weapon system allows it to forego them quite effectively. Its primary weapon is the drone, a semi-autonomous hybrid energy projectile weapon that is fired from a handful of drone ports around the ship. Drones themselves are considered borderline superweapons, launched in small bursts to entire swarms, using their superheated energy field to effortlessly penetrate through most heavy shielding and nearly all materials. Given sufficient energy at launch, they can make several passes through a target, automatically aiming at critical components before detonating themselves. While it is usually guided by a neural interface, it is still smart enough to avoid incoming fire, and its energy field is powerful enough to no-sell any other counterweapon, only being brought down by other drones. It should be fairly evident that drones are pretty darn close to being a true end-all be-all weapon, but even so, they are limited in numbers to several thousand in onboard ammunition storage. To supplement the drone weapons are a series of 16 to 24 heavy pulse cannons, more conventional energy weapons that are scattered around the hull in batteries of 2 to 4 apiece. While nothing to write home about, they do provide a moderate boost to firepower whose endurance is only limited by its power source. While its offensive firepower is impressive, its defensive shielding is just as capable, boasting some of the most powerful shields in the entire Stargate universe. When fully powered by a ZPM, an astronomically potent energy source, it could survive combat even when sorely outnumbered by the far larger Hive ships. Unfortunately, when running only on secondary power, the shields are substantially weaker, being much more susceptible to drones and heavy firepower. Should the shields be overwhelmed, its hull is covered in reinforced armor, though it's only a distant backup to its shielding. While it is out of the ordinary, Far Battle will be assuming it's running a nearly depleted ZPM, just in an effort to make the fight a little bit more fair, as using a full-strength ZPM would be a curb stomp in its favor. Just saying. And next is the Infinity-class Supercarrier, the single largest and most powerful warship of the UNSC. While it was constructed during the Human Covenant War, it wouldn't be completed until after the war, wielding the most advanced technologies developed from Forerunner and Covenant artifacts. It was more than a match for remnant Covenant forces. While it was repurposed as an expeditionary vessel from its original role as a mobile colony ship should humanity fall, it retains the heavy frontline attack and fleet deployment functionality from its wide array of weapons and huge ship complement. The signature weapons of the Infinity are without a doubt the 4 internally mounted Series 8 Max, which are comparable to defensive Supermax in firepower. Aside from this massive Alpha Strike capability from the Max, it also has a huge array of 25,000 missiles of the Archer, Rapier, and Howler variety. Pretty much conventional missiles often used en masse to overwhelm defenses and pick apart weaker targets. For more defensive firepower, it has a network of 830 70mm point defense turrets that can mow down enemy fighters and projectile ordnance, but will be utterly useless against drone weapons. Thankfully, unlike all UNSC ships before, the Infinity was equipped with energy shielding, and not a cheap knockoff either, but full-on Forerunner-based shielding, making it even tougher than Covenant shielding altogether. Besides its very impressive shields, it was also clad in almost 5 meters of titanium A3 armor. This was a quantum leap from its previous version that was barely adequate to survive more than a handful of plasma shots, but now virtually indestructible in comparison, requiring consecutive energy projector shots to fully breach. Even if the first shot was quite damaging, I consider this to be a lower end feat. The Forerunner shielding, along with the titanium A3 armoring, makes the ship more than capable of combating entire fleets and coming out on top. To help it combat such large forces, it could deploy up to 10 Strident-class heavy frigates. These 575-meter-long frigates are armed with mechs and shields, providing an onboard fleet for large combat operations and the tactical flexibility that wouldn't be possible with only the Infinity herself. Besides the deployable frigates, The Infinity also carries a total of 150 F-41E broadsword strike fighters. The fighters are able to carry a single anti-capital ship missile, but would be very questionable in effectiveness due to their fragility and the durability of the enemy. Even the 10 frigates will be fighting a very uphill battle to damage the Aurora at all. While helpful against other vessels, the Infinity's complement will only have a negligible effect on the battle overall. And since I can't help myself but do a size comparison, both of these warships are immense. The Infinity coming in at 5,694.2 meters. That's over 5.5 kilometers of state-of-the-art UNSC warship. The Aurora isn't quite as large, coming in at a mere 3.5 kilometers for its larger variation. And for reference, the Subjugator class heavy cruiser fielded by the CIS from Star Wars, its most infamous vessel being the Malevolence. It came in at 4,845 meters in length, roughly right between the two competing ships. Finally, we get to the battle itself. The two vessels starting out about 1,000 kilometers apart in deep space. As per our usual rules of engagement, no FTL is allowed whatsoever, only sublight travel. And standard ship complements are allowed for the duration of the battle. As each vessel is capable of devastating alpha strikes, the Aurora would begin by launching a moderate-sized swarm of a few dozen to couple hundred drones, though they would take a few minutes to cross the vast distance. In response, the Infinity would fire its primary max, striking the battleship back in a near instant. While devastating, the Aurora shielding would tank the rounds, with its own drones causing quite a bit of strain against the Infinity's shields, but still holding strong. Realizing the distance was impairing its attack, the Aurora would begin to accelerate quite fast to get into optimal firing range for its drones, about 100 kilometers or so. While the Aurora is getting into position, the Infinity's complement of strident frigates and fighters would be launched in rapid succession, leaving the initial MAC assault to have softened up their enemy. Firing another round of MACs, this time in coordination with the frigates, would begin to register on the Aurora's shields. Now with better positioning, the battleship would begin a continuous bombardment on the Infinity using a combination of drone and pulse weapon fire, the drones avoiding the fighters and frigates and focusing on the Supercarrier. Aiding the continuing MAC strikes would be a massive launch of missile fire, dumping thousands of them at the Aurora to little effect. The frigates, realizing their temporary safety, would move further afield and would continue to fire at long range. The broadswords may even try to strafe in close to the Aurora, trying to get a lucky shot in, but even then, a handful of redirected drones would wipe out any attempt at getting in too close. After several minutes of slugging it out, the Infinity's shields would finally collapse completely, its advanced armor now taking the brunt of the attack. The Infinity's armor would prove somewhat resistant to a few hits from drones, but the continued bombardment would punch through regardless within a few more minutes, destroying the Infinity altogether. With the Supercarrier gone, the frigates would quickly be primaried by the drones as they're quickly torn apart. The lone Aurora, with its shields taxed, would come out on top. The Aurora-class battleship would defeat the Infinity-class Supercarrier about 9 times out of 10. The only shot they would have would be a last-ditch effort using a Spartan boarding party, and that is assuming their Pelicans aren't targeted whatsoever. Had the Aurora been using only its auxiliary power, as was the case with the Astern production line, the Infinity could have handily overwhelmed its shields with a few volleys of its max. Otherwise, the raw amount of power available to an Aurora makes the outcome directly dependent on the ZPM and the flexibility of its main weapons. Despite giving the Aurora a run for its money, the Infinity unfortunately loses this one. If you would like to see more ship versus or breakdowns on a future episode, please comment below. Thank you very much for watching today's episode, I certainly hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe for more content, and remember, this was your first pass at the Infinity vs. Aurora.